begin whenever you... I'm going to go ahead and mute myself.
Good to go, Ren? All right. Hello, everybody. I hope everybody is staying safe and healthy. First, I just want to thank everybody that's out there on the front lines, the EMS personnel, hospital administrators, doctors, my fellow National Guardsmen, and especially those that are close to my heart, because my mom is one, our nurses who are coming in contact with these patients each and every day. This is the first time we've conducted a Zoom meeting, and while I have a fantastic team, we are doing this across 5 different locations. If you have questions, we're going to go through the slides. Please submit them on the Facebook Live comments or the Zoom chat. And please note that the Zoom chat should only be used for questions, as we're trying to monitor everything at once, and I don't want things to get a little disjointed. Please note that, we're going to get to as many of your questions as possible. And while we're still going to respect the meeting time of 7 to 8 p.m., because I know many individuals want to get to the NFL draft to watch the Redskins pick second. We'll make these, lastly, we will make these slides available to everyone at the end, whether it's via our email distribution, which you can sign up for our regular updates at bc4md.com and click on the updates. That's how you get in contact with our email list. Or, we will try to post them up on Facebook for everybody to pull down. And then again, I want to thank you all for joining us. And I would like to give a particular thanks to 2 special guests joining us today, Professor Dave Kung from St. Mary's College and Dr. Mina Brewster. So slide. Okay, so I represent District 29B. I know we have people joining from all around the county, as well as the entire state of Maryland. I know several people have called in, but I want to touch on my district, which is the southern portion of St. Mary's County. First, this is state investment in the county. And when I ran for office, I told you that we were going to get a return on our dollar. And so the first thing I want to bring up is that we got $35 million for the college for a new academic building and an auditorium. Additionally, we got $500,000 for the Autonomous Systems Center. Our airport continues to be the fastest growing economic sector in the county, and this state investment continues to prime the pump for future investment. And lastly, one unique highlight is we got $280,000 for historic St. Mary's City to begin excavation. There are some major developments in Maryland's first capital, and I imagine there will be an announcement, maybe even from the governor himself, after we get through this pandemic. But all in total, over $40 million invested in St. Mary's County from the state of Maryland. Working across the aisle with Senator Bailey, the last 2 years, we have seen a dramatic increase in our county's investment from the state that we really haven't seen in decades. So we had a couple people write in regarding 5 and Great Mills, which is the predominant infrastructure project in my district. And frankly, it is the bane of my existence, as many of you know. So I just want to kind of do a recap for some of you who are joining us for the first time and let you know how we got here. 2 years ago, we did not have a plan. Last year, we successfully pressed State Highway to finalize the plan. And then this year, we're slated to start the right-of-way in July. Additionally, last Friday, we reapplied for the build grant for a total of $50 million. And the build grant is a federal grant for state and local infrastructure projects. Unfortunately, last year we got rejected. However, we made numerous updates and worked with our federal delegation and increased the amount we have requested. And I'll kind of go into that on the brief or on the slide. So this is the overall plan that we have. And the crux of the problem is the bridge, which you really can't see it on this, but it is just north of the sheets. And that bridge goes over the St. Mary's River, and it can't withstand the weight of 4 lanes of traffic. So the goal is to make it from 4 lanes from Great Mills Road all the way up to Callaway. This plan only has 4 lanes from Great Mills Road to just prior to Little Flower School. And that is why requested the additional funding in the bill grant this year. So that way we can have 4 lanes, 2 north and 2 south, all the way up to Callaway. So let's talk a little bit about the coronavirus. Slide. So, these numbers have moved dramatically throughout the day. But the last numbers that we have seen, there have been 855,000 cases in America, and we have lost almost 48,000 fellow Americans to this terrible virus. The federal response, a while ago, Congress actually boosted the amount in the payroll protection program, but the initial step was passing the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, the CARES Act, was a $2 trillion stimulus package by the federal government. Maryland received $4.9 billion in that in direct aid. And as I mentioned, we have the payroll, or it also created the Paycheck Protection Program, which the original funding was for $349 billion. And then I believe the House just passed another $480 billion to continue to fund small businesses. And it is administered through local banks. And so the goal there is that people or business owners are able to access that capital much more quickly than if it went through the government. Additionally, earlier this week, President Trump released guidelines to reopen the economy, and there were 3 phases, but I think the biggest theme throughout them, or the biggest takeaway, is that there has to be a downward trajectory of documented cases within a 14-day period. Slide. So this is how Maryland looks, and currently, okay, so first let me just touch on the fact that yes, there are currently about 16,000 cases. However, we know that there is significant undercounting. So I wouldn't focus on the total number of cases. I think hospitalizations is the key factor. And in total, Maryland has roughly about 6,000 beds. And you can see in the last 24 hours, we had another 152 individuals admitted because of the virus. So we're still on the path up. It has slowed, but we are still on the incline. And then at the bottom there, I just want to note 2 links. The first is the Maryland State website for the coronavirus, where you can follow daily updates. And then the second is the St. Mary's County Health Department, where you can also gain updates about what is happening here. And tomorrow, well, we'll get into this, but the bottom line is the federal government, their guidelines for reopening, one of them is for hospitals. And that is why that hospitalization number is so critical, because hospitals have to be able to treat all patients without crisis care, as well as provide robust testing, a robust testing program, and have that implemented and in place for at-risk healthcare workers, including emerging antibody tests. Slide. So like I just said, the governor's plan to reopen Maryland will be briefed tomorrow. I am looking forward to that, as I know many of you are. But throughout that, he has had 4 key components to his reopening phase, and you will probably see this throughout his brief. The first is access to more test kits. And I will come back to this, but Saturday, we worked in a diplomatic way through the governor, and frankly, through the First Lady of Maryland, Yumi Hogan, to procure 500,000 tests from South Korea. Additionally, hospitals have to be able to handle a surge of cases. We need more PPE. And then lastly, contact tracing. We want to, under the governor's plan, he wants to quadruple the amount of people dedicated on this front to 1,000. And the ability to conduct, what contact tracing is it's the ability to conduct an interview with an individual who tested positive and then trace their steps over the previous 2 weeks and contact those individuals to A, notify them, and then B, tell them to quarantine as most patients we know are asymptomatic in the beginning phases. Slide. Okay, so these are some of the state guidelines, and these are probably the 4 that we get the most questions on. So I just wanted to make sure everybody was flat. That's the reason for putting these 4 on the slide. So the first is the last executive order by Governor Hogan was the stay-at-home order, and that was effective on March 30th. Additionally, schools will be closed on May 15th, when Maryland State Department of Education will then reassess. Masks must be worn in all retail establishments and on private for hire and public transportation. And you need to still continue to follow social distancing guidelines. And then lastly, I know many of you want to social distance yourself from your children, but you can't do that by dropping them off at daycare unless you're an essential employee. So daycares are only open to essential employees. Slide. So I want to talk for a second about the budgetary impact on the state of Maryland. Per Comptroller Francho, Maryland is estimated to have a $2.8 billion revenue shortfall this current fiscal year. According to the Maryland Constitution, we must have a balanced budget. And when we passed the fiscal year 20 budget 2 legislative sessions ago, it was balanced. However, the virus has thrown everything off kilter, as many of you know. So the governor has 2 tools that he can utilize. The first is the rainy day fund, and I would say that it is raining right now, not just outside, but figuratively or within the economy. And that has $1.1 billion allocated to it that he can use to offset this pandemic crisis, or the economic crisis caused by the pandemic. The second is the Board of Public Works can vote on a spending cut. And the Board of Public Works is comprised of the governor, the comptroller, and the treasurer. The treasurer is Nancy Kopp. And they can vote to cut spending by 25% through a vote. The only thing that they can't cut are mandated allocations or appropriated funds. And the last thing I want to kind of talk about, and this goes back to our previous conversation about 5 and Great Mills, is, I've seen articles, and should be commended. MDOT and State Highway should be commended for completing the Bay Bridge. And this seems like one of the best times to ever complete or start infrastructure projects while less people are on the road. But the problem is that because less people are on the road, less people are buying gas, and then therefore the Transportation Trust Fund isn't being replenished. And that is going to throw off major infrastructure projects going forward. I don't know about the remainder of fiscal year 20, and I don't have the slightest clue of what is going to happen going forward into fiscal year 21. I still think there are many things we need to consider before we have a path going forward, and hopefully we get some of those details in the coming weeks. Slide. So as you know, or many of you know, immediately following session, which ended 20 days early, I was activated in the National Guard. I am very fortunate to work directly for the TAG, which is the Adjutant General, which is Major General Tim Gowan. He is actually from Leonardtown, so he's St. Mary's County owned. We're doing, he is a model for the rest of the state of service, and he's one of ours and a local guy that worked on PACs, but now is devoting his time daily on the front lines, and it's humbling to be by his side during all this. So a couple things. First, we have 1,400 National Guard members activated. We have another 700 in reserve that can be called up within a matter of hours. We have strike teams, which consist of medical personnel, which assist medical efforts in over 40 nursing homes and children's facilities. Additionally, we're doing food distribution in Frederick, Baltimore City, and Eastern Shore. So it's not just urban areas, it's also rural areas that we are servicing as well. We've established and operated test sites. The main one many of you have seen is at FedEx Field, but we also have one at Pimlico, Rawlings Conservatory, the State Fairgrounds, and et cetera. And then lastly, I know I touched on this previously, but Saturday was a huge day in the country. And it was incredible to take part in that Operation Enduring Friendship, where Maryland, through its relationship with South Korea, predominantly through the First Lady, we received 500,000 test kits, which greatly increases our capacity to begin the testing. I think, you know, the two notes that I would make: first, I wouldn't have any shock if you see Maryland's numbers rapidly increase. Just keep in mind that you're looking for the number of positive cases relative to the number of cases, or the number of tests done as a whole. And then second is, and because of that, you know, this is a huge deal, because now Maryland has more testing capacity than 4 of the top 5 states combined. So this should put us on a path to reopen the economy faster, and this greatly improves the state in our response. Slide. So one of the hardest things that we've had to try to navigate with so many of you is the amount of individuals trying to navigate the unemployment insurance. And at the end, there'll be a slide there with our contact information. If you are out there and struggling, we want to help. So please don't hesitate to shoot us an email or reach out. But the CARES Act, when it was enacted at the end of March, it did 2 things. The first, it provided additional support for unemployment insurance. And then the second was it created pandemic unemployment assistance for many Marylanders. And I want to kind of highlight that third purple box there, because I know many of you have been self-employed, and some of you may have had just a business with just yourself, and you typically wouldn't qualify for unemployment insurance. This bill does just that, and you are eligible for PUA, or pandemic unemployment assistance, starting tomorrow, Friday, April 24th, for anybody that's watching late. And that will open up the ability for you to automatically receive either unemployment or pandemic and unemployment assistance for 39 weeks, plus an additional $600 a week up to 4 months. Additionally, the last little bullet note there, that is the unemployment website for the state, for Department of Labor. Please, when you get these slides, if you have any questions, go to the unemployment frequently asked questions section first. Next slide. So we're lucky tonight to be joined by 2 incredible people. First is Dave Kung. Dave has a PhD in mathematics from the University of Wisconsin. He was awarded the 2006 Teaching Award from Maryland, Virginia, and DC section of the Mathematical Association of America. He's the co-founded Emerging Scholars Program at the college, and he's a lecturer for the great courses and conferences globally. And a fun fact, he's a violinist for the local community orchestra. Mina Brewster, Dr. Mina Brewster, is she has her MD and MPH from the University of Miami. She is St. Mary's County's health officer since 2012, and she served as the medical director for the Health and Human Service Commission at the Indiana State Department of Health, and taught at the University of Indiana School of Medicine prior to coming here to St. Mary's. So we're going to go to Dr. Kung first, and he's going to present first for us this evening. Dave, it's so great to have you on. Recently, I know you produced a piece for the Great Courses Plus series entitled "How Math Predicts the Corona Curve." I watched it, and I think the insight offers an incredibly important insight for so many of the constituents. So I'd just like for you to touch on that.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks for having me, and hope everybody out there is staying safe. You know, when this all happened in early March, I was teaching calculus to students at St. Mary's. You know, calculus is all about understanding change. So, so one of the very last assignments I gave them in person on campus was to predict what was going to happen. So, I think it was March 11th or so, and at the time there were 850 documented cases in the U.S. So 850. And they did the math, and they used their newfound calculus knowledge to predict what was going to happen. And I'll be honest with you, at the time, most of them thought it was really overkill to shut things down, to go remote teaching. We hadn't gotten to the point where we had stay-at-home orders or anything like that. But you could tell that if you knew what we were talking about, if you could predict the future, which is what math is all about, you could see that was coming. And so they ran the numbers, and the numbers were really sobering. The two numbers I want to tell you are, they predicted that I asked them, when are all American hospital rooms going to be full if we continue acting like we have? And on March 11th, what they predicted was that would happen on April 13th. On April 13th, if we continued going where we had, we would hit 4 million active cases, and that would require about 400,000 hospital rooms, and that would max us out as a country. And that doesn't even take into account the fact that there would probably be hotspots where it'd be worse. Now, the other number that they predicted, I asked them how many cases we would have at the end of March, and they predicted just under 200,000 is what the number said. And then all chaos came, and we went to remote teaching and all of that. I looked back at those predictions at the end of the month just to see how close they were. And on March 30th, the US had 196,000 cases, and they had predicted like 197,000 cases. So the mathematics of this, at least initially, was really dead on. It was just an exponential curve, and everything followed almost exactly along that curve. To predict that accurately based on numbers that were in the hundreds, 850 cases, and they predicted really accurately out to 200,000 cases. It just shows like exactly how the mathematics is really modeling exactly what's going on. And thankfully, all the social distancing that we've done, all of the stay-at-home orders, all of the people hand washing more and wearing masks have really bent that curve down. So we haven't seen what they predicted out into April, which would have been just a catastrophe. And that's thanks to everything that people have done to tamp down this epidemic. When you think about this mathematically, like there's two big things that you have to know about an outbreak to understand it mathematically. One is how quickly people are recovering, and the other is how quickly contact is spreading the disease. And the thing about any outbreak like this is we have almost no control over the rate at which people get healthy, but we have total control over the rate at which there's contact. So we can certainly improve the rate at which people get healthy, and I think Dr. Brewster is going to talk some about that. But we can't adjust it too much. Once you have the coronavirus and you get the disease-related COVID-19, it will run its course, and you might need, if you're lucky, you won't need hospitalization. But if you do need hospitalization, then you need hospitalization, and we've all heard about what you need in terms of ventilators and things like that. But we don't really control what happens once you get the disease. We do control how likely it is to spread. And when you look at this, the number the mathematicians talk about is R0. It's if you take one person getting infected, R0 is the number of people they are probably going to infect on average over the course of their disease. And if you look at something like the flu every year, you get an R0 of like 1.8. And if you look at something like even the Spanish flu that ran through all of humanity back in 1918, you look at that and it's something around 2. And they were estimating early on, we still don't have good numbers, but given normal human interactions, they're estimating that the R0 for this virus is somewhere around 2.5, maybe as high as 3. It's definitely higher in urban areas like New York, and it's lower in rural areas like where we are. But that is just 2.5 for an R0 is just a monstrous number, and that combined with a fatality rate, which is a case fatality rate, which is significantly higher than what we have for the regular flu, maybe 10 times or even 100 times higher than the flu. You're just looking at a real catastrophe, and that's exactly what the mathematical models predict. And it's what we've so far been able to avoid because people are getting the contact rate down and taking R0 lower and lower. What we really need is for that R0 to be lower than 1 for a significant period of time, so that more people are getting healthy and fewer people are spreading it. And over time, we could actually run this down to 0, which is what they've done back in Wuhan. So that's what the mathematics looks like, and I really appreciate you giving me the time and opportunity to talk through it. I'm happy to answer questions. I'm also really excited to hear from Dr. Brewster about what's going on locally.
Thank you so much, Dave. I really appreciate you coming on this evening. If anyone has any questions, please put them either in the Facebook comments or the Zoom chat, and we'll try to answer as many as possible after this. Next, I want to bring in Dr. Mina Brewster, who has pretty much been face of the county over the last, I don't know, 5-6 weeks, and has been an absolute stud the entire time she's been our county health director. And we are so fortunate and lucky to have her. She's going to share her thoughts with us about the most up-to-date information in the county, and then the most recent suggestions and guidance the health department is offering. So thank you so much, Mina, for calling in.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Delegate Crosby. Appreciate the opportunity to talk with everyone who's tuning in. Obviously, the pandemic is foremost on everyone's mind right now, so really appreciate the time to talk more about it with our residents here in the county. As of today, right now, we have had 136 residents in St. Mary's County diagnosed with COVID-19. Unfortunately, we've lost 5 of our neighbors in St. Mary's County to this disease. But some good news coming out of this is that we've had, at least thus far, over 30 of our neighbors that have recovered and have been released from isolation from COVID-19. So we're monitoring data on a ongoing basis. We're looking at things like gender distribution, race, ethnic distribution. We're looking at how these cases are distributed across our county. All of that data is maintained on our website and updated daily. Our website is www.smchd.org, and then you can hit the red button on the front that takes you to our coronavirus, our COVID-19 page. So if there's any specific questions about data, I'd be happy to answer those as well. But just know that we are looking at a variety of data points relevant to this, because that gives us a chance to identify trends and identify areas that may need additional action. We are in a space of widespread community transmission of COVID-19. That means it is being passed from person to person across the county and all areas of the county. There are certain zip codes that may be more impacted by cases, partly because they have more people living in them, and those are noted on our website. But really, we are seeing widespread transmission throughout the county. And that's really why, at this point in time, as Delegate Crosby was talking about, we are still under a stay-at-home recommendation. We're still recommending that people are taking measures to social distance and other measures to protect themselves. Infection control measures like washing your hands, covering your cough, and so forth. But then also measures like wearing a cloth face covering if you have to be in a space like public transportation or retail where it may be hard to maintain social distance. So we're doing all these measures because we know, fortunately in our county, they've been working. Our population here has been less mobile and less in contact with one another since the governor's orders have come out over the past several weeks. We've been monitoring that, and I know that that is contributing to why we are now seeing while we're still seeing new cases every day, we're seeing a slower rate of increase in those new cases. So we know the social distancing is working, that everybody's doing. We know that the efforts we're making with all of our community partners to contain disease and the spread of disease is making some headways. So there's still a lot more to do, though. In addition to what I was mentioning in terms of all of our work on surveillance and monitoring data, we are maintaining a lot of means for communications for our community so residents can get their questions answered. I mentioned our website. smchd.org, but also we have the COVID-19 community hotline that the health department partnered with county government to launch some weeks ago. And that hotline is 301-475-4911 and is open from 8 to 5 Monday through Friday to answer community questions, community member questions, and really maybe even talk to individuals about personal symptoms they may have as well. We are maintaining a joint information command as well, and we're working with communications leads from many different partners in our community. And Jenna Guzman is our communications director with the health department and is directing the joint information command. And all of our messages we're getting out through those partner organizations as well to their respective sectors. The big part of this right now is about disease control and investigation. So Delegate Crosby already mentioned some of the strategies in that. Testing is a big part of that. As you may be aware, we're still dealing with a pretty significant national shortage of testing supplies. But the recent supplies that Governor Hogan acquired, we're hoping to get some of that for St. Mary's County. And we're also hoping to get some additional testing supplies through other means. We do still have the drive-through testing mechanism that is being implemented through MedStar St. Mary's Hospital. That's from noon to 2 p.m. Monday through Friday. And people need to have a doctor's order for the test. And they go through that drive-through mechanism to get their COVID-19 test. The results on these tests typically take 2 to 3 days turnaround, which is a lot better than it was even just a few weeks ago. And there's also other places that are doing testing throughout the state and also in our county. Some of the urgent care centers in our county are also doing testing. We are looking to expand and do more testing as well in our community. We're about to launch some strategies to have more testing available in different parts of our community. Another part that's really important, I think, for disease control is really to protect the people in our community that are probably the most at risk for getting infection or getting severe disease. And so the people that are most at risk for getting infection are the people that really don't have an option to stay home. They're the ones who are our first responders, our law enforcement, our healthcare workers, people working in critical infrastructure like energy and Metcom and so forth. And then, of course, individuals that have to work in some of these essential businesses like grocery stores. So a lot of these individuals, because they're dealing with people continuously and they're not able to social distance as well as people who are able to stay home, we are working very closely with them to develop strategies that we can minimize their risk for getting infection and also their risk for passing on infection to others. So that involves a lot of intense work with many different partners. We're also working with some of the more vulnerable populations that are vulnerable for severe disease, and that includes the individuals who are older, maybe older than 60, as well as individuals who may have chronic medical conditions, because we know that they may be more at risk for severe disease, and we have to do a variety of things to work to help prevent them from getting infected as best as we can. So we're working with our long-term care facilities, our nursing homes, and other kind of senior living areas and other places where there may be congregate living, where people are living together and so forth. So we're doing a lot of strategies from a prevention standpoint, but then also working with them if cases are identified that we quickly isolate those individuals so we decrease the possibility of infecting other people. Part of the strategy of protecting the individuals who are our first responders and healthcare workers and law enforcement has a lot to do with personal protective equipment. We do still have national shortages of personal protective equipment. It is really, something that, of course, is in high demand across the world, and certainly here in Maryland and in St. Mary's County. So we do two things. One, we try to extend out how long we can use the personal protective equipment we currently have. And so we look at things like decontamination and extended use of PPE, or that personal protective equipment, so that we can stretch out how long our current supply will last. And at the same time, we're putting in lots of requests for more PPE at the state level, and then also ordering it nationally, so we can be better prepared for the long term here in St. Mary's County. Right now, our supply seems to be adequate across our first responder groups and law enforcement and the hospital and some of our long-term care facilities. But we do know that down the road, weeks from now, we have to prepare for weeks from now as well, not just here in the moment. And so that's why we continue to look at PPE. One of the things we've learned with this infection is the high rates of people passing on the virus to others before they know they have it. That's something we're calling asymptomatic transmission. So somebody could be infected but not have symptoms of the virus and still be exposing others. And that's a big reason why we are still in the stay-at-home phase, where we're encouraging people to social distance, and also a reason why we've more recently been encouraging people to wear cloth face coverings, so that when they're out and about because of essential services, that they are able to help decrease the risk that they might transfer virus to somebody else in those settings. And lastly, I really just want to recognize and mention, because I'm sure people in the community have seen some of the efforts in this regard, is a large part of this is about preparing for a potential surge on our healthcare resources. So we know that if we have lots of people getting sick at the same time, and if we have lots of people who are very ill, they may need hospital care. They might even need intensive care in the hospital. What we don't want to happen is everybody getting sick at the same time and getting very ill, and then we have a surge on our hospital and other healthcare resources that could potentially overwhelm that capacity. We've certainly seen that in other places across the world, and we're doing everything we can here locally to prevent that. And so we're all working very closely together. There's many partners who are part of this local response. The hospital has done a wonderful job at increasing its internal capacity, meaning having more beds available here in St. Mary's County for inpatient or in-hospital care. We also have some medical tents that are very solid structures that are built now on the hospital parking lot. And that will be on an as-needed basis, a last resort kind of basis, that if for whatever reason, and again, we're preparing for the worst here, even though our predictions have definitely gotten better here locally. But if for whatever reason we are experiencing a surge on our hospital system, that we would have that kind of extension of the hospital into these very solid medical tent structures that are fully equipped and will be fully staffed with medical professionals to provide safe hospital-like care. We also have a larger medical tent being built out as an alternate care site as well, and I'd be happy to talk about that some more if you're interested. So lots going on. Like I said, there are a tremendous number of amazing local partners that have been working together very well to respond to this pandemic. I can't recognize that enough. I mean, we really have something special here in St. Mary's County. We know how to pull together, and we really know how to work very well together. I think we have months ahead of us. I'm not sure exactly when the as we're going through. I mean, we have to see kind of what the impact is over the next several weeks. We are anticipating that our numbers of cases will continue growing, especially as we increase testing access here locally. But we are, continuing to prepare for what demands may be down the road.
Thank you so much, Mina. I really appreciate it. Just a couple things. First, we had a question come in from General Gallon, and just succinctly, what are specifically the county's needs in relative order? Is it more PPE, additional testing, more acute beds, or is it something else? And long just here's our boom, boom, boom. These are the three things we need in order ASAP.
Yeah, great question. It's hard to prioritize because I think all of that's needed. I do think first and foremost, we need to protect the workers on the front lines here, our healthcare workers, our law enforcement, first responders, and others, including some of our public health professionals that are out there in the community. So we need to make sure they're completely protected, and that PPE is pretty critical to that. We have, like I said, the supply we need right now in the moment, but we do need more for the kind of ongoing effort. So we're looking for getting more of that PPE to us. The additional testing is another critical component here as well, because we do know, we have diagnosed tests. MedStar has done a great job at opening up a drive-through testing mechanism to give some access, but the shortage of tests is real, and it's not just the test kits, it's the chemicals in the lab that they need to run the tests. So we need more testing supplies to be able to identify who else in our community may have infection. Once we're able to identify who has infection, our health department can do that disease investigation, contact tracing phase of response. And that really helps people isolate themselves from one another, so we slow down the spread of the infection. So that disease investigation, contact tracing is incredibly important. But we're not able to do that until we identify if somebody has infection. So that testing is another big piece.
Yeah, thank you. And then, Dave, do you want to follow up a little bit about the overall county numbers? I know Dr. Brewster had mentioned 136 cases. Do you want to kind of just expand on that? Additionally,
yeah, thanks, Brian.
1 second before you answer that, because this might tie in. We also have another question come in about the modeling, and they may tie into each other. Are the models we're seeing, are they predicting a second or third wave similar to the Spanish flu?
Mm-hmm. Thanks. I think it's really important. Like when you hear a number like 136, first of all, that's already a lot of people who are fighting with a really nasty bug, and we've already seen some people pass away. I think there's a tendency among some people to think that 136 isn't that many. And I just want to really emphasize that, first of all, studies out there suggest that the number of identified confirmed cases in the US, that you might have to multiply that by something like 10 or even 100 to get the actual number of cases out there, or even something higher than that. So it's a lot more than that, probably. We just don't have the tests to confirm that. But the other thing is, like, we have a real problem managing our own personal risk versus our collective risk. And it might seem like, you sneaking out to go to Lowe's to get something for a project you need or something like that, that it's a really low personal risk. And the truth is, it's not that high of a personal risk. You're unlikely to come in contact with one of those 136 people, or even if it's 10 times or 100 times. The problem is that if every one of us thinks in exactly that same way, we're screwed. And then we head out to the situations like Dr. Brewster is talking about, where we really overwhelm our healthcare system. So like, it's a personal risk versus a collective risk, and we have to think about the collective risk at this point, because we really don't want to put all of our first responders and our medical system in that kind of peril. I love the question about if we're going to see a second or third wave. The models that I've seen show that that's definitely a possibility, but the problem with modeling something like that is that it's all about human behavior. and it's really hard to model human behavior. We can model what happens to an outbreak given particular properties of it, but we can't model people making decisions and whether they're going to stay home or whether they're going to go to Lowe's or run to the grocery store to get the one item they think they need. So if people come out and do things like that, then we probably are going to see a second or a third wave or something like that. But if we all collectively work together, we can stamp this thing out more quickly.
Thanks, Dave. I appreciate it. Mina, one more follow-up question from General Gowan. He's a long-time listener, first-time caller tonight. He asked, do you feel you're getting everything that you need from the state compared to some of the larger counties that have multiple screening and testing sites?
Well, thank you, General Gowan. That's a tough question, only because I know the state is trying and they're distributing what supply they have. No, we're not getting everything we're requesting at this point in time, but our requests are in and we keep inputting additional requests so that as the state receives additional supply, they'll distribute it across all the jurisdictions in the state putting in those requests. But there's still more. Yeah, we need more PPE for the long road. As I mentioned, we're okay right now in the moment, but for the long term, we do need more PPE.
Thank you. Hey, Ren, actually, let's go to the last slide, Brandon. So we'll put that up there. So that way most people can see the contact information. If you have any questions or struggling to go through unemployment insurance, they are the emails and the phone numbers to call and reach out to us. Email is probably most effective because it goes to the entire team. So I'm just going to leave it on this slide. And Ren, I'll turn it over to you to ask some of the questions that people are submitting and sending in.
Okay, so hi everyone. I am Ren Heisler. I work with Delegate Crosby, and I'm just kind of monitoring the questions on the Facebook chat and then some questions that were pre-submitted, and then also the ones that are here in the Zoom chat. So I'm going to actually start with a pre-submitted question, which was from Natalie Lynch. So Natalie, thank you so much for writing your question in. And Natalie's asking, and I'm guessing this one would need to go to Dr. Brewster. Once residents have, supposedly recovered, how is that proven, or are they requested to prove that they're recovered and not contagious anymore? How does that part work?
Yeah. Thank you, Natalie. I think that's a great question. When a resident is identified and diagnosed through a lab test as having COVID-19, we'll follow them through the health department. We actually speak with them and have a full conversation about their symptoms. And of course, we do the disease investigation contact tracing part, but we also talk with them about when they would be ready for release from isolation, because really when they have symptoms, they should be isolating themselves, a separate bathroom and bedroom than other people in their home if possible. So the release is determined by their symptoms. We also have another way of doing testing to make sure the tests are negative before release, but because of the limitations in testing availability, we're really focusing on symptoms as being the reason for release and so recovery from their symptoms. So there's 3 criteria that residents need to meet, and we have this all on our website at the health department as well at www.smchd.org. And the 3 criteria are that residents have had to have passed 7 days from the time their symptoms began, and their symptoms have had to have improved, and they should have no fever for at least 72 hours. So 3 full days with no fever without the use of any fever-reducing medications like Tylenol and ibuprofen. So they should have no fever without the use of medications for 3 days. They should be at least 7 days from when they started having their symptoms. And their symptoms should be better or resolved. That's when we know that they're able to be released from isolation.
Great, thank you so much for that answer. And thanks again to Natalie for submitting that question. So the next question was also pre-submitted, and that came from Stephanie in Lexington Park. And Stephanie is asking, and this is more about the stay-at-home orders. So Stephanie is asking, is flying alone in a general aviation aircraft off limits per the stay-at-home order? So I'm guessing Delegate Crosby, you would want to address that one.
Well, thank you so much for writing in, Stephanie. First, under the governor's stay-at-home order, unless you have to be flying for essential purposes, i.e. groceries, you really shouldn't be out. And while it doesn't explicitly state no flying, we shouldn't be working against the intent of the executive order. Also, to fly, I'd imagine someone needs to clear you for takeoff. And outside of BWI and other major airports, I'm not sure anyone is in those control towers. So like I said, I don't know that the orders specifically prohibit that, but I think that it probably is against the intent of the governor's order. But good question.
Great, thank you. So the next question is from Randy and Drayden. And Randy is asking, where did the governor get the authority to close non-essential businesses and prohibit people from free association? How does what he has done square with Article 44 of the Maryland Constitution? So that's you again, Brian.
Yeah, thank you, Randy, for the question. So the governor gets the authority through Title 14 of the Maryland Public Safety Code. First I just want to say I understand everyone's frustrations during these challenging times, but no constitutional right, in my opinion, and from many of my attorney friends, seems to have been violated. We as Americans are really just so used to expressing ourselves, and we're not used to having anybody tell us what we can do or try to restrict us in any way, shape, or form. But under Title 42 of the Maryland PSC, there is a provision that permits the governor to disregard any Maryland law that interferes with his ability to deal with the emergency. So Title 14 is a very, very broad measure once a state of emergency is declared. I understand the moral argument that is being made. We should have these rights, but you can't argue, in my opinion, that it is unconstitutional. Additionally, I've seen some comments online that founders would be rolling over in their graves. Now, I think that the founding fathers, and there are articles on this, have considered the threat of public health pandemics when drafting the Constitution and allowed states and local governments to have policing powers during this time. And the 10th Amendment of the United States Constitution reserves the policing powers to the states and local governments during an emergency period caused by public health pandemics. So it's pretty clear that the governor is exercising the authority that is granted to him. And everything that he has done can be traced back to Title 14 and then further to the 10th Amendment of the Constitution. And I think that a lot of this surrounds an individual's viewpoint, but government isn't just worried about individuals in this case. It's trying to protect the entire populace, and that's balanced against an individual's rights. So, you don't have a right to infect other people. And what I hear from a certain small minority faction is, frankly, I don't want this responsibility. So we all have a duty to our fellow Americans and our fellow, more specifically those in our community, our neighbors, to not infect them and to follow and adhere to these social distancing guidelines for everybody's safety, not just your neighbors, but for people like me that are in the National Guard, or people like Dr. Brewster, or nurses like my mom, or my dad who works in grocery stores and is out and about in the public, it seems like each and every day, even though he is trying frantically not to do that. So the less people he can interact with and the less people everybody can interact with, the better it is for everyone, and hopefully we get through this more safely. Good question, though.
Okay. The next question is from Matt Fleck in California, Maryland. And Matt's asking for clarification on the OLC interpretation for barbershops. namely how that profession impacts public safety. So I don't know, Delegate Crosby, if you want to maybe start this one, and then Dr. Brewster, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, so I mean, Mina, you can jump in, but I'll start. The entire barber argument, that entire universe started here in St. Mary's County. I don't know. First off, as far as barbers go, I don't know of many other professions that come in contact with more people than barbershops. People are in and out of them daily. You have groups that congregate in the waiting room, and certainly you can mitigate that. But the barber is touching someone constantly, and they are in close contact. Not exactly sure how you cut someone's hair standing 6 feet away. That is a challenging thing to do. So, what a likely scenario is the first customer has the virus, and the barber contracts that off of him or her, and then cuts 10 more heads that day. And because people are asymptomatic, for the first 5 days, they can continue to cut hair, let's just say 10 people each and every day, and then pass and spread that on. And so quickly you could have 50, 60 people infected from one barber, that, before the individual or the hairstylist even knows that he or she is affected. So under the OLC interpretation, it states that only essential personnel that have a regulation that they have to keep their hair in a certain form, such as police officers or the military, they are allowed to get a haircut. But for the remainder of the population, they are closed. Mina, did you want to jump in with anything, or does that pretty much sum?
Thank you. I think you covered it.
Okay.
Again, it's mostly one-on-one appointments with individuals who are essential workers that have grooming standards that are required by their workplace or for their profession. So, for example, if they have safety concerns that necessitate some type of grooming standard, if they're working around machinery, or perhaps they're part of law enforcement, or they need to wear certain types of masks that require a certain seal, you can't have facial hair for that, things like that. But they should be one-on-one appointments, and social distancing maintained as best as possible within a retail setting, a barber setting, despite those one-on-one appointments.
Okay, so the next question is actually one that came from Facebook. So this question is from Rose Frederick, and she asked a really good question that I thought a lot of people might need to know the answer to. So she's asking, if someone has been switched from full-time to part-time employment, does that person qualify for unemployment insurance?
First, hello, Rose. How are you? So it's great to have you on the call, and it's a quick and easy answer. Yes, if your employer has reduced your normal hours as a result of COVID-19, you may be eligible for partial benefits, and you're encouraged to apply.
Okay, so the next one was submitted ahead of time, and this is from Tom Kavanaugh in Lexington Park. He has kind of two piggyback questions about the MVA. So he's asking, he commented, there's going to be a huge backlog at the MVA because of this closure. So he's afraid that the 30-day extension for renewal of licenses is not going to work. So he's worried about all the people who are currently delaying are going to be lining up in addition to any normal business for renewals that MVA might be getting. And then, so he was wondering if they have a plan for that you know about. And then secondly, if someone's driver's license expires, can that person drive out of state? And he was just commenting that it seems like we should be able to print something to take in the car.
So this is probably the first time in history anybody wants to go to the MVA at the current moment. And, Tom, thank you so much for the question. I understand the concern about MVA's backlog. I am not aware of their plan to move forward. I do know that many state employees, even though they are not in their physical locations or their physical work locations, are still working around the clock and remotely to install or implement plans to combat or to transition back into regular life. And that is going to take some time to work through. I mean, we already know that typically the MBA, as I made a joke in the beginning, is a little bit slow and painful for many of us. But I'm sure that they will, implement a plan and they'll put that out on their timeline. Travelers with the state license that have expired since March 1st, 2020, and are not eligible to renew their state driver's license at the agency can still use it as acceptable identification at a checkpoint or while being pulled over. So TSA will still accept an expired driver's license a year after the expiration date plus 60 days after the duration of the COVID national emergency. So it seems like, based on what the NVA's guidance is, that they will have a plan to get things caught back up within 60 days of the pandemic ending. But great question, and yes, you can travel between states.
Okay, one more question for Dr. Brewster. I know that Dr. Brewster has to head to another call. Poor Dr. Brewster. You guys, we need to be so appreciative of her. So one last question for her. A bunch of people are kind of chiming in on Facebook. I think I can make this into a two-part question for you. One, is it possible for someone to be carrying COVID-19 and not showing any symptoms? So, potentially someone's released from isolation, they're still a carrier and they haven't shown symptoms yet. And then sort of to piggyback with that, is it possible to get COVID-19 again? Do we know that yet? Is it possible to have it, show symptoms, theoretically recover, and then to get it again?
Yeah, thank you, Ren. And those are both really great questions. I appreciate whoever asked those. Thank you. Yes, it is possible to have the virus that causes COVID-19 but not have symptoms of COVID-19. That kind of goes back to what I was mentioning earlier about asymptomatic transmission. In fact, we're seeing a lot of disease being transmitted, or the virus being transmitted from person to person before people even realize they have it, because they don't have symptoms of COVID-19. And the symptoms are typically shortness of breath, cough, fever. There might be other things like a loss of the ability to smell or a loss of the ability to taste. They may have sore throat, diarrhea. I mean, there's a lot of different symptoms, and all of those we have listed on our website at smchd.org. So yes, it is possible for people to be carrying the virus, but not have symptoms of it. The second question about reinfection is a really good one. It is one that we don't have answers to yet. The science on this virus, it's a new virus to humans, really, and we are constantly learning and monitoring all the science that's coming out related to this virus. So there's a lot of learning still to be done on this, and we're hearing about people possibly being reinfected. What we don't know right now is that because they never became immune? Is it because they're getting reinfected with a slightly different strain of that virus? Something that's mutated maybe, or is it because they were never actually diagnosed? They thought they may have had it, but they weren't diagnosed, and now they're being diagnosed. So that is something we're really concerned about, and we're monitoring very closely, and it will definitely have an impact on kind of the long term of how we're dealing with this illness.
Hey, Dr. Brewster, I want to thank you so much. I know you got to drop off. Just trying to be mindful of people's times. We'll take one more, Ren, but Mina, I just wanted to say thank you for hopping on and providing people in the county so much insight.
Thank you. Brewster.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And Delegate Crosby and Ren and Dr. Kong, I really appreciate everything that you shared as well. And for everybody on the phone and on the Zoom call, hang in there, stay with us. We are doing some amazing things together here in this county. I mean, there's so many partners and residents and businesses that are doing their part. We will get through this, and it will be something that we learn a lot of lessons from, and something that will help prepare us for other issues down the road. It really is just making our community stronger for the long term. I know the times are really tough right now, but what we're doing is working and it's making a difference. So thank you very much for all your efforts.
Thanks for your leadership on this.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you,
Appreciate it
Dr.
very much,
Brewster.
Dana. All right, Ren, do you want to ask
One
one more
last question. Yeah, let's do one more. We were supposed to end at 8, so we're already a little bit over. I want to respect people's times. But
Redskins may have already picked, Ren.
yeah, I know. Sorry, everybody. Sorry, football fans. One last one that was submitted early, so I feel bad for these people because they were on their game. So this is from Tom in Lexington Park, and the question is about inmate early release. And he wants to know, how is this being processed, and is the early release information being passed on to victims?
So, two-part question. The first, the governor released nonviolent offenders that were set to be released within the next 4 months. That was requested by both defense attorneys as well as prosecutors. It increases this, and really the main purpose behind it is to increase the safety of those remaining, to include the Department of Correction officers who already have personnel issues. And additionally, that has been exacerbated by staff calling out because they're sick and possibly showing signs of COVID and then would need to be quarantined. So that is putting more of a strain on already a skeleton crew at the Department of Corrections. Additionally, I think the governor was looking at it from a burden to taxpayers, and by releasing these nonviolent offenders, I want to keep that in mind. Make sure you understand it was nonviolent offenders. That reduces the likelihood of a prisoner becoming infected. And if that prisoner becomes ill, they're going to have to go to the local population, which costs money for transportation and security throughout the stay. And additionally, it increases the possibility of an escape. So, and it ties up a bed, a hospital bed. I know we talked about this earlier about how hospitalizations and the capacity, that's really the number that or the metric that we need to be using to kind of guide our sales here. One more bed taken because of a prisoner being infected on something that we could have potentially prevented doesn't seem like a good plan of action. We're not releasing nonviolent offenders, we're not releasing violent offenders. We're not releasing sex offenders, and we're not releasing those offenders of domestic violence. So, it is, again, for nonviolent offenders that have 4 months remaining on their incarceration time period. And the policy does not change. The early authorization does not change the overall policy for releasing inmates. So that remains in accordance with how it is typically done. So, Ren, thank you so much. Dr. Kong, thank you for joining us. I want to thank Brandon for running the slides. The team has been hard at work really for now over a month. And I just want to take a second to recognize them and all their hard work, whether it's processing UI or getting information out to the public or trying to run down and collect tents for the homeless. That has all been done by the people that are here on this call. And it's not like you can say it's not this robust staff. It's just normal people in your community. And, these guys, especially Ren and Brandon, have been my heroes. I want to thank Dr. Kung again for joining us. Dave, the math was fantastic. It's always great to see.
Thanks for giving me the opportunity.
Yep. And lastly, I just want to thank everybody at home. I know that, and I will echo Dr. Brewster's sentiments. I know that this is tough. It is extraordinarily challenging. And, sometimes I feel cooped up in the house too. But doing the right thing for the everyday regular people of St. Mary's County is to just stay home and limit the amount of movement and contact you have with other people. So that way we can get, our frontline hospitals and EMS personnel back up to full strength, and we can get through this. So Again, I want to thank you all for your time, and hopefully you enjoy the rest of your evening. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you all so much.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.